This week we begin studying the topic of epistemology. That is our issue for the next 3 weeks. And the flow for the semester will be as follows, or for the next 3 weeks will be as follows. This week we will look at the topic of rationalistic epistemology. The following week we will talk about the topic of empiricistic epistemology. And the third week, as we wrap up epistemology, we will look at the topic of Kantian epistemology, because Kant helps to bring together those two perspectives. Epistemology is a fancy word, philosophical word for just referring to the nature of knowledge. What we can know. How can we know something to be the case? And there are basically two schools of philosophy regarding how we know what we know. One of those schools are what is called the philosophical rationalist. The rationalist said that knowledge is innate. You are born with knowledge. Knowledge is within you, and that the only way you can know something is from logical or analytic truth. The rationalists say that knowledge is prior to experience, that experience is not dependable because experience can lead you astray. For example, a simplistic illustration and yet a relevant illustration is if you put a stick into the water, it looks bent, and yet you pull it out of the water and it is not bent. So your senses have deceived you. Or you stand between railroad tracks and you look down the railroad tracks and it looks as though those parallel rails merge, and they do not merge. They remain parallel. So your senses once again have deceived you. Or you might take your hand out of cold water and put it into hot water, and suddenly it feels cold, but then you discover that it's hot. So once again, your sense of touch has deceived you. Well, the rationalists said that evidence is that the senses are deceptive and that they cannot be relied upon. They're not dependable. By senses, I mean taste, touch, see, hear, etc. And so they said the only way you can know something is through that knowledge that is analytic truth within you, which we'll see illustrations of that. The rationalists that we will be looking at this week are two. There is Plato. Plato is the beginning of rationalism, and then there is Descartes, who is the first of the modern philosophers. There are other rationalists, but we will not look at those rationalists. Typically, the other rationalists, or the three leading rationalists, are Descartes, Spinoza, and Leibniz. But we will only be looking at Plato and Descartes. Plato because he is essentially the foundation for rationalism. So then next week we will talk about the topic of epistemology, and the topic of empiricistic epistemology. And the empiricist said that knowledge is a posteriori, or knowledge is after experience. That stands in contradistinction to the rationalist who said that knowledge is a priori, or prior to experience. The empiricist said that we gain knowledge by the senses, that as we experience things, then we gain knowledge. We experience the touch of heat from a stove when we learn that stoves are hot, or we learn from experience that grass is green, that leaves are green. We learn from experience that it's cold in the winter, etc., etc. So we learn from experience. They were optimistic concerning the senses, in distinction to the rationalists who were very pessimistic or skeptical with regard to the senses. In empiricism, we have the foundations of modern science, the scientific method. As far as the specific individuals under empiricism that we will look at, the three leading empiricists are as follows. They are John Locke, George Berkeley, and David Hume. And we will look primarily at John Locke and David Hume as we consider empiricistic epistemology. again, the word epistemology is simply a fancy word for knowledge. How we know what we know. Do we know what we know through the senses? The empiricist said yes. So then the third week we will look at Immanuel Kant, and Kant helps to bring together those two approaches, rationalism and empiricism. We may think that this is an antiquated discussion. It is not as antiquated as it might seem, because today we discuss the same topic under the nature versus nurture debate. And although there's some variation and there's some digression between the two, the modern take on rationalism versus empiricism is nature versus nurture. So should be a good 3 weeks as we talk about epistemology. I will post another video next week as we get to the empiricist, but this week we will consider the rationalist. It's great to have you in class. I hope you're benefiting and enjoying trying to make application of the material, and that's our goal and our objective. Have a great day.